following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, live here on a beautiful Tuesday in Statesboro from Allen E. Paulson Stadium. The team just got off the practice, or not the practice field, the game field from practice, but just got done with that in the last couple of minutes and getting ready for the first scrimmage of the preseason. That coming up on Saturday here at Paulson Stadium. You can come check that out. Open to the public, per usual, and you're going to have a Fan Fest coming up afterwards as well.
That's part of what's being called Donor Weekend. It actually begins on Friday with various events taking place all across campus. There's going to be a gathering Friday night over at J.I. Clements Stadium. And I believe there was an email that was supposed to have gone out today regarding special details. I think there are individualized itineraries for all donors that are participating because, remember, during the spring, suggestions were requested about how can we best serve you, what would you like to see, and using that around the framework of the first football scrimmage is a really good idea. And emails were supposed to have gone out again. You can check yours from the athletic department regarding the itineraries for this weekend, but things have definitely picked up. This is our first chance to actually talk about what we've seen practice-wise.
Yeah.
And we'll get another chance to talk about the scrimmage, and as we advance closer to the opener against Gardner-Webb, we have actually got the coaches poll is coming out sometime within the next couple of minutes, and you've got 5 Sunbelt coaches that are amongst the 65 coaches that are part of this year's voting class.
Chad being one of them.
Chad is one of them, and there is a distinct possibility you're going to get 2 teams preseason top 25, I would think. There's a chance that you could have 3 Sunbelt teams in the preseason top 25.
That's so crazy. We got a full episode today. We're going to preview what Georgia Southern football looks like from the quarterback position. A lot of news coming out in the last couple of weeks. We'll get you caught up on everything that is actually what happened in the last couple of weeks. But because we're talking about quarterbacks, we're going to talk about one of the greatest, if not the best, quarterback to come through Georgia Southern. Tracy Ham going to be joining us here in a little bit. But first, going to dive into the news and notes in the past week in Georgia Southern athletics. Just a quick note to pass along: the Edwin Jackson Memorial Walk-On meeting will be tomorrow at Paulson Stadium. That'll be a 5 p.m. start. So anybody wanting to join Georgia Southern football team as a walk-on, now you still have to have eligibility, be within that 18 to 23. You can't be 56 and try to walk on. I guess you could. It wouldn't happen, but you could try. But when you get to Paulson, 5 p.m., come over to the FOC, and you will be entered into what is going to be the pool, and they will tell you when all the walk-on actual tryouts is going to be. This is just going to be the informational meeting.
You do need your class schedule. You need some paperwork. Make sure you have all of that taken care of, and if you need more information in advance of tomorrow, go on gseagles.com. There's a good write-up on the website regarding your chance to be newest member of Georgia Southern football.
Georgia Southern golf having a note come out this past week. Wilson Andres won the 102nd playing of the Georgia State Golf Association Match Play Championship last Wednesday. He had to win 5 matches in 3 days. I haven't won 5 matches in my life in golf, let alone 5 in 3 days, but a huge congratulations going out to Wilson Andres. He's coming back for his senior season for Georgia Southern men's golf this upcoming season.
Look, we've had our battles in mini golf over these last 5+ seasons, but 5 match.
At some point,
that'd be a good episode, just mini golf.
Yeah, no kidding. We have to get Joe on for that. Joe Cashman from Coastal Carolina. But at some point, that picture of you laying on your stomach because your ball had gotten stuck in one of those little...
One of the windmill deals.
Yeah, and you were pool cueing it out. That was pretty fantastic.
Like Kevin Costner in Tin Cup.
There you go. NFL camp started this past week. You actually had the Hall of Fame game, the first preseason game in the NFL this past weekend. It was not the most thrilling.
It never is.
But
never is.
Had a lot of Eagles, 9 Eagles in NFL camps right now. Tyler Bass and Matt Breida with Buffalo. Raymond Johnson III with the New York Giants. Younghoe Koo obviously with the Atlanta Falcons, trying to earn his way as the starting kicker again, and probably going to be that way unless something crazy happens.
Pro Bowler, I would think he's in.
Yeah, I'd imagine that's a pretty well, assuming he got his cleats back.
He doesn't have his car yet, but I think they found him some cleats.
Fantastic. Ryan Langan will be long snapping with the LA Chargers. Jerick McKinnon with Kansas City. Josh Moon just got picked up as a safety by Seattle. Donald Rutledge with Arizona. And Kendall Vildor with the Chicago Bears. He's got a shot to come out of camp as the starter for Chicago. I know there's been a lot of buzz around the Chicago area. You went on at least one, if not a couple of podcasts talking about what he is, who he is, and introducing him to Bears Nation.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk with Zach Pearson of the Bear Report. It's part of the 24/7 network, and we gave them a further idea of what it was like to watch Kendall for 4 years. Remember, he played a decent amount as a rookie last year. We gave him some guff for not picking off Aaron Rodgers up at Lambeau. He had the perfect chance to take it away from the guy that would be the NFL MVP last year. There is a better-than-average chance that he starts for Chicago this year, and that would just be the fitting thing for someone that worked so hard here to become an All-American. It would just line up with who he has become as a person and as a player.
We'll keep an eye as NFL camp go, who ends up making rosters, who ends up changing places, but we will keep you abreast of everything going on with former Eagles in the NFL. A couple other notes to get to. Pascal Wagemaker earns COSIDA Academic All-American this past week, a 4.0 in mechanical engineering. That, in and of itself, outside of what he did on the tennis courts, should be enough for an All-American, let alone doing that while playing a sport and doing it well, as Pascal did.
We mentioned the idea of the student-athlete. It comes up almost every week, but especially now with football season, to understand the grind that these players, men and women, have to go through, spending all the time they do with their sport. That's both on and off the field when you're talking about strength and conditioning, nutrition plans, film, other conditioning. And then having to be full-time students, having to be ambassadors to the community, to where they come from, all while representing themselves and Georgia Southern. It's something that when you're 17 years old and trying to figure out where you're going to go to college, you don't necessarily get the full picture of it, and they try to get you on various campuses and give you at least a taste of it. But when you get here, you lace up your shoes, you put on your equipment, and then school starts, and you've got to figure out how to balance all of that, and then maybe you get to have a little bit of a social life, just depending on where you want to stack up socially. But it is extremely difficult now, probably more difficult now than ever. And when you toss in NIL, who's going to be trying to get theirs, who considers it important, who thinks it's a luxury, who can put it off to the side and say, you know what, I'm here for other reasons, but that's all up to the individual. But I do applaud every one of our student athletes for the commitment they put in to try to be the best they can be.
And I know Georgia Southern football had the Gata Lifestyle experience this past weekend, where you have people come in and are able to experience what a day in camp is like.
Yeah.
I think it would be cool if you had a couple people come in and have to go to class with the student athletes, have to go through everything they do, whether it's weights at 5 o'clock in the morning, then going to class, then study hall, then everything that goes on while school is in session. I think people would be really surprised as to what a day in a student athlete's life looks like.
And it's about this time of the year where a Joe Bag of Donuts athlete or Josephine Bag of Donuts athlete has their schedule posted. Oh, you want to be a college athlete? Well, 6 a.m. until roughly 11 o'clock at night every day. It's not just doing it for a day. The people that did Gata Lifestyle, I think there were 15 of them all together, they get a chance to go through the first couple of days of football camp. But for athletes across all sports, their schedule's basically done for them.
Yeah.
But what it actually takes to succeed in so many different areas at this level.
A couple other news notes to get to. Georgia Southern women's soccer was picked 9th out of 11 teams in the Sun Belt Conference preseason poll. Marcela Montoya, a preseason All-Sun Belt pick. That is a team that I think is going to surprise a lot of people in the Sun Belt, not just this year, but for years to come. Chris Adams entering his first full season. He got a couple of games in the spring to get to see what he had, but that is a team that is going to surprise a lot of people. Got to see him in a scrimmage this past Sunday, I believe it was. But they will open at the College of Charleston on August 19th. They will have an exhibition in Greer, South Carolina, meeting UNC Asheville about halfway. That coming up this Saturday. So you can tune into gseagles.com and see how Chris Adams and bunch turn out against UNC Asheville, and then College of Charleston coming up on the 19th.
It was nice getting a chance to catch up with him a couple of times during the spring whenever we had the gatherings to celebrate women's tennis winning a Sun Belt championship and also men's golf winning a Sun Belt championship 10 days later. To hear him talk about getting acclimated to Statesboro, building his program, first time he's had a chance to do it from a Division I perspective, but to hear about all the recruiting and the work that he's had to do to get his vision into place, I'm not going to be surprised when that program more than exceeds that preseason selection. I think that it's a given.
No doubt. As we advertised earlier, it is time to welcome in one of the legends of Georgia Southern football, of Georgia Southern athletics overall, Tracy Ham, the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Administration. Tracy, appreciate you joining us.
How you guys doing? I appreciate you guys welcoming me on the call today, on the podcast, I should say.
Take us into what, in your role, has changed a little bit since you've come back to Georgia Southern a couple of years ago as an administrator. What does kind of the typical day look like? What are you overseeing?
Well, it's like the things you mentioned with the student athlete. I'm basically tied with the student athlete. I have a very diverse role. I do a lot of programming with Apex programming with the student athlete, and also, just really with psych leadership. I'm also on the psych leadership, and then outside of that role, I am cultivating donors. I have a local group that I cultivate here in Statesboro. So I'll travel some with the foundation. So Jared is kind of redistributed. My role is more, it's a hybrid role because I'm doing a lot of different things. And then like everybody else in Statesboro, I'm also watching the quarterback race that's going on at football. So I'm into all the sports. I thought we had a really good spring sports. I thought the spring season really kind of set the tone. You can all go back to the bowl victory that's setting the tone as we started on a new platform with Jared and his administration. And so it's interesting. It's been a lot of fun for me, and not just sitting behind the desk, but really getting out, interacting more with the student athlete and also with our fan base from the donor side of it. Yes.
You can get your questions in for Tracy on Facebook Live by commenting on the Facebook live stream. But kind of going back through your story, when was your first memories of Georgia Southern, and what was it about Statesboro that made you come here? Because I know you had other offers to go play college football.
Well, there were offers, but I wouldn't say they were favorable offers for me. They sounded better than they were because I actually had a couple of opportunities to go to different schools, but it was for a different position. So when I came to Statesboro, I knew this was kind of like the last stand for me. There was no real option of picking anywhere else but Statesboro because of not because of Coach Russell per se, but because of the ability to stay at quarterback. And so having that, understanding that's where I wanted to be, and Coach Russell presented that as the only place that they had thought about me playing. So it was really an easy decision for me to land here in Statesboro. And I think the hardest part was trying to look at what the future held, because we were playing at a high school. We had no stadium, and you really just trusted the process. We trusted a lot of things that people said, when you put up the sign said a building will come in such and such years. Well, it held true because the little stadium did come. The things that they said were coming did come. And so it was exciting times for us as young student athletes.
What about your journey can you share with Georgia Southern's current crop of quarterbacks?
Well, competition is at its best because when I arrived at Georgia Southern, there was 5 of us. I was the 5th one, being I was the last one to sign. So I kind of got the last place rep. So, it was competition from day one. I think that's what, for me, was the exciting part, was I got an opportunity to compete. It was a new offense for everybody because nobody really knew kind of what we had no history of what we were going to do. And so being able to compete, fight for my reps in camp, make sure I stayed sharp, make sure I stayed up on the playbook, and just try to improve every practice, really. For me, I always was the competitor that kept an eye on the guy next to me. I wanted to make sure that if he did something better than me, that I really honed in on that skill and just try to perfect it. And for me, just to be able to look at other players, because coming through high school, you are the player and everybody's kind of looking up, trying to take your spot. Now you're thrown into an even playing field. And so just competing for every rep, Danny, just really understanding how important it was to practice well every day and just trying to get noticed by the coaches from a consistent standpoint of view. And I think that's the biggest thing for me was how can I remain consistent and get a little better each day?
You talk about playing for Coach Russell. When you were playing with him in the grind of, we've seen the picture of doing practices on tennis courts, did you know how special Coach Russell was going to be to Georgia Southern at that time?
Well, not really, because when you're in it with them, you just going, okay, he say go left, we go left. He said go right, we go right. He said don't do that, we didn't do that and get caught. So for us, we just felt like we had somebody that really cared for us and really had a complete understanding of the game. He was well respected in the football community. He was well known in the football community, and so he just came with a lot of respect. Right? And I think when you play for someone with that you have respect before you even hit the field, it just gives you a different perspective of it. You just don't want to let that person down, or you just want to make sure that you're not the one that break that trust with that coach. So we didn't know how special he was because we thought he was pretty special every day, right? Because some of the stuff he would come up with, we didn't realize how special it was until you thought back and say, oh, okay, it was 105 that day. That's probably why he said that, right? To keep us motivated, to keep us on track. He always did things to keep our mind off of the conditions around us and really just focus on the game itself.
How much more difficult do you think that is now with the explosion of social media and the implementation of NIL policies all across the country?
Man, you open up a whole can of worms, Danny, because I think I just applaud our coaches of today. I just don't know how you can keep a kid motivated. I don't know how you keep a kid's level of concentration. You really have to really trust the student athlete more and more nowadays because there's so many distractions. I just look at how kids come off the field and the first thing they do is grab their phone to see what's going on socially.
Yeah.
It's a constant check of the phone, and our phone was in the room on the wall. So if you was not in the room, you did not get a phone call. If you missed the call, you just missed the call. And the guy go, I called you. I go, okay, what you want? Right. So I just really applaud the coaches and the coaching staff, not only in football, but just throughout this industry of coaching, because there's so many things that can distract the student athlete, just from the things that are being posted about them, just the mental toughness the mental awareness that's going on, the mental health things are going on now, and people are being bullied online, or people are being, just so many different aspects that are being that you have to contend with now, that it's almost impossible. Let me get that phone.
Talk about the growth that you had when you were here at Georgia Southern, not just you personally, but what the football program was like whenever it's first starting up when you first get here. What was that time that you were here like, of how much growth not only you, the football program, but the whole university kind of saw?
Man, if you were not there, it is unimaginable right now, right? Because if you were back with us and a lot of the era that came along with us in the 80s, when they look at the institution now, just a lot of joy, a lot of happiness for the growth, the foundations that were laid way back when nobody thought about today. A foundation was being laid that can stand the university status on now. And so to just be able to see the growth that Georgia Southern, the community, the surrounding areas have experienced, the value in property, the value in businesses, all those things were tied into the growth of the university, and football just being a part of it. It's just been an unbelievable process. And it's just been amazing for not only myself, but just all of us that came up during that era, because anytime you live in during an era, you don't really think about the historical things that are happening at that time. You just trying to get out of school, you try not to get in trouble with the coach, you're trying to win your next ball game. You're just trying to stay ahead of the game. But when you get an opportunity as an adult and look back over the history of the program, the history of the institution, you just see that there were so many instrumental things that happened in this area, so many instrumental people that were involved that in the big picture, football was just a small piece of it, but it was a critical piece of it that allowed people just to look into Georgia Southern a little deeper than they would have had we not had a football program that ended up on the early stages of ESPN, right? No, people don't remember, but I mean, you sports guys remember, but ESPN was just in its early infancy stages when we were playing, and it had to be one of the most exciting games that they could have put on television. And then they kept the audience out east through the wee hours of the night because we was out west. So I just think that we were a part of something that, just trended. And, because now you can see the trend, and other people want football programs to help the institution to grow or help people look into the institution. You look at the Valdosta's, you look at the Kennesaw States, you look at the Shorter College, you look at all these schools that are starting programs. And really what they're saying is that, hey, we just football gives people an opportunity to look inside the institution a little deeper, had it hit the scene like we hit it in the 80s.
Depending on how you want to look at it, student athletes now have a lot more opportunities, but those can also become distractions. The work that you and Glenn have done with the Apex program, with the current state of affairs in college athletics, how much more meaningful is it to you to be able to be in the position that you are to positively affect student athletes and get them ready for their futures?
Yeah, we just really, I think Apex programming, it was a collective effort through the senior staff, just trying to get the right name, trying to get the right connection that where our students can connect back to something even after they leave. But I think at this point in time, it's just so critical that you go out and recruit student athletes who understand their value, not only just as an athlete, but as a student athlete. And I think for Apex programming, it's our responsibility to have a place where they could get information to help them understand how to maximize who they are and what they mean to their sports, their community, not only the Statesboro community, but also their community back home and the kids they impact. You get an opportunity to showcase a student athlete from some of the smaller towns, and they get an opportunity to inspire other young student athletes from their community. So it's such a big picture process, Danny, that I just really, I really enjoy that we are able to have a place for our students to have a resource, because what we become is a resource for our student athletes. And we want to just make sure they have every possible resource available to them so that if they needed to talk about whatever they have on their plate, because there's so many things on their plate now, that we just want to be that landing spot for our student athlete to come and say, hey, can you help me with meeting somebody in engineering department or a lawyer department? And we just want to be able to have everything they need from a resource standpoint, and then just show them how to access the resources long after they're gone, while they're here. And like you guys said earlier in the podcast, there's so many things that are on student athletes' plate now, from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed. And we just want to be a place that they have resources in between them lunches and practices that they can say, hey, let me just make a quick run over to the resource center to get some help, the academic center to get some help, to help me understand something. So I'm all for it. I think it's a good opportunity for us, and not only us, but the athletic department to continue to join with the partners with our student athlete, because it's a partnership. It's a partnership with our student athletes, and we want to be a good partner where we provide the right resources for them to have an opportunity to grow after college.
There's a part of your story that I haven't heard necessarily a whole lot about. Everybody knows what you did here at Georgia Southern and then what you did in your CFL career. But what were those couple of months, couple of years between the two where you're getting into the CFL? What was that transition like from Georgia Southern into your pro career?
Well, when I came out, I was drafted by the Rams in the 9th round. So after draft night, I hopped on a plane and went to California and was looking for the California dream until they put my hand in the dirt and said, hey, you playing tailback. And I couldn't see, and it was just a whole different world for me. And so I spent some time, spent minicamp with the Rams when John Robinson was the head coach. And at the time, I was also negotiating with the CFL team, Canadian, Edmonton Elks now, but they were the Eskimos at the time. We were negotiating, and it was to compete at the quarterback position. And so after minicamp, I moseyed on up to Canada, Edmonton, to the frigid Northwest Canadian territories. But from there, I ended up being dropped into a situation where there were two guys ahead of me, Matt Dunnigan and Damon Allen, who are now Hall of Famers. So I was dropped on a team that had two were going to be Hall of Famers. So you can tell what kind of career they was already having. These guys were real pros. And I just put my thinking cap on, my learning hat on, and I just learned. It took me about a year to pick up the game, understand the rules, what was to my advantage, what was to my disadvantage. And the next year, one of the guys was traded. Matt Dunnigan was traded. And so now I was number 2 competing for the number 1 spot. After my second year, first game, Damon Allen was hurt out for 10 weeks with a bad knee. And so it was either sink or swim. Do we have the right guy? Do we need to bring somebody else in? And so I was able to really learn, understand the game by two of the greatest that had played the game, and then give an opportunity after my first year to compete and win games. And by my third year, Damon left, and I was the starter for the team my third year. It was my team to take where we were going to take it at. So it took me about 2 years to learn the game completely. And after my third year, I had a complete understanding of what it took to win and compete at that level.
All right, everyone that knows Georgia Southern football knows that there are two numbers that are retired here. AP's number 3 and your number 8. How did you end up with number 8? I don't know this story.
So number 8. So I grew up with number 7. And number 7 was my number coming through high school. And when I got to Georgia Southern, David Barris, a guy from Benedictine, was an option quarterback, really good option quarterback out of Savannah. I think David still lives in Savannah today. And he had number 7, and so wasn't really an option, right, because he had been here and he had beat me to the number. And so I said, well, let me have number 8. Begrudgingly, I said, give me number 8. I just took the next number up. So it wasn't no real sign to us. It was just like, okay, can't have 7, give me number 8. And Roger was so gracious to let me have something at that time, because he was the toughest, tightest equipment manager you ever seen at that time. And so that's how I get number 8. So I just went to the next number up, and 8 was, the next count.
All right, Roger has told plenty of stories about you on Eagle Tales over the 3 years that we've been doing this podcast. Now that we've got you on, we've got to give you an opportunity to get some of your shots in as well. I know there's a lot of stories with Roger between over the years, and a lot of them that you probably can't tell. But what are some of your favorite Roger stories from over the years?
Well, Roger he did everything. He was the equipment manager, bus driver. He fixed the bus. He kept the bus running. He changed flat tires. He did everything. But me and Roger bumped heads when we first got here because I was third on the depth chart, and Roger just did not believe in giving the third-team quarterback anything. I mean, nothing. But what was issued, and glad you got what was issued to you. And so we were getting ready to play our first game in my shoes. We had these Converse, Chuck, these old Converse with the mesh in the middle with the screw ends, and they just really was tough on your feet. And I hated playing in dirty shoes. Like, that was one of my nightmares. Like, I hated dirty shoes, right? Because I didn't feel. And so I said, well, Roger, we playing. I need a new pair of shoes. He go, for what? You the third-team quarterback. You're not even going to play. And I go, well, you don't know that. I might get to play. And so we back and forth, and I was just so mad at. How does the equipment manager have this much power? And so he said, I tell you what, rookie, and he'd come up with a name for you. So he said, every time you win a game, you can get a new pair of shoes. But after the 5th game, I was end up, competing. I was getting some starting reps, and then I got into the starting lineup, and I'd win a game. And every time I win one, I'd knock on his window, on that old window back in the halls, Hanner. I'd knock on his window. And by the time we finished, I didn't have to ask anymore. He'd just have a new pair in my locker waiting for me. And so to this day, he still hates to admit that he had to give me new shoes every game, after every other game, because those Converses just got tore up in the dirt and the mud because we practiced in the mud. So he didn't really like that one. That was when me and him really started communicating a little better after he was having to put new shoes in the locker on a consistent basis.
That's great.
There's a lot of people around Georgia Southern that touch this football program, especially in the early years, and a lot of people, if you really dig into it, that don't necessarily get the credit that they deserve. You've seen this football program from a lot of different angles, from a lot of different positions. Who are some of the people that you think kind of go unnoticed with this program, whether it be back in the day or even still with the program now?
Man, you're going to get me in trouble, right? Because I'm going to forget somebody, right? Well, when you go back to the early stages, it's just some of the people I don't even know, but I just know the ones that were instrumental for me during our time. And I just thought Morris and Ann Lumpton were just great for us. They owned the time savers at the time, and they just really poured into us, not only as a program, but as young men. I thought MC Anderson and his family were just great to us. Angela and Andrea, the daughters that went to school with us, I just felt like they really just opened up and just they just did a great job with us. And then you can never, Alan Lee Paulson is just, him and his, what Gulfstream did for us was just, you just really can't put a price tag on it. And then when you go to our local communities, the Dirty Dozen, I thought, were an interesting group. But Bruce Yon, I thought, was one of the guys that this most unrecognizable guys that has helped us. When Snookies was here and the things that, we were able to go over to Snookies and grab a good meal. And I just thought, and he was a Georgia guy by heart and nature, played at Georgia. But Bruce opening up Snookies to us as a community university, as a staff. I just thought that, and I thought Ronnie Pope did a great, you can go on and on with people who just, for me, that just touched me as a young student athlete here that they didn't have to. I thought Johnny Trimble, who was my Eagle Wing parent, that was the principal, really helped me make the transition from High Springs to Statesboro, him being an educator, just having a place to land and really be able to, see a successful African-American. That's really inspired me, just watching him and what he was doing in the community. There's just so many people, and I know I'm forgetting a ton of them, and I'll probably hear about it, but I could go on and on with the people who placed their fingerprint on our institution and this university, and that has helped us continue the traditions and legacy that will continue.
All right, we're going to dive into it here in a few minutes of trying to dissect what the quarterback battle looks like for this year. You're the resident expert on quarterbacks. From what you've seen the first little bit, what's kind of stood out to you?
Well, first of all, I just hate starting off with rookies and freshmen, right? It's just always been a pet peeve of mine. But to say that, I'll say it with this. If you're going to start off with one, I tell you what, I've just watched the young man just work day in and day out. I'll come by practice, I'll see him throwing by himself. Obviously, JT is our guy. We need JT to get back on the field as soon as possible. I think if we're going to take a deep run, JT is our guy. He has to be. He just has too much experience. I felt like we should have, helped JT out a couple years ago after the Minnesota game. I felt like that earned him the right to get in the rotation on a consistent basis, and I thought we missed the opportunity there. But I think JT has shown a sturdiness, a toughness that I think we're going to have to survive this season. I think we got one of our better teams, but we have one of our tougher schedules. It's just unfortunate that our schedule is this tough this year because I think our defense is going to be a little deeper. But at the quarterback position, you always want someone there with some experience because you just never know how a freshman is going to react. And it just sometimes it's unfair, but then, sometimes, there are opportunities for freshmen to step in and say, hey, I belong. And we're going to find out if that's the case this year. But in the long run, I think JT's the guy that we're going to have to rely on for leadership, especially in some of the tough ball games we're going to be in. I just never seen the Sun Belt so deep and so tough that I've seen us this year, and the people that we're playing, and the top 25, 2 teams, possibly 3 in the top 25, as you stated earlier. Who would the third team be? That would be App State?
Well,
the third.
The poll did come out, and this is going to be great for 2 teams that don't play each other this year. The Cajuns are preseason number 23, Coastal's number 24.
Wow.
And App was receiving votes.
Okay. So App was the other third team. So, and we just lucky us, we play all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love the Sun Belt. I don't know if they just don't. They seem like that we haven't had no kindness since we've been in this league. But I wouldn't expect anybody to give us any kindness, because we've always traditionally have not received any kindness from no conference, right? So, like I say, it's a tough, quarterbacking is the one position, leadership. You want game experience. So, but we'll just have to see how it plays out. I think starting off with Gardner-Webb gives us a good opportunity to peep in to see what we have. So, but competition is all over the field, and I think that's the running back. I mean, we're as deep as we've been at running back. I just love those. How do you get them on the field, right? You got to get the ball, and I think that's where Doug's experience is going to help us, is getting the ball to different people, keeping the ball in fresh backs' hands. The receivers have been catching the ball as good as, you can see it all coming together, right? I thought our receiving core has done a fantastic job of attacking, catching balls. I know people don't want to hear about receivers in Statesboro, but the reality of it is we're going to need those guys to come up and play big for us. If we're going to get to the level of championship caliber, you got to have receivers who make plays with the ball in the air.
Tracy, really appreciate you coming on this afternoon and joining us for a few minutes and telling your story and continuing to help out what Georgia Southern does. Appreciate everything that you do for Georgia Southern.
Well, we thank you guys. Y'all have a great day. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Thanks, Tracy.
Once again, that's Tracy Ham, the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Georgia Southern Athletics over administration. And he's somebody that we talk about it a lot, the people that are so vital to what Georgia Southern does, because they've been here, they've experienced it, they've been through it to get to it. And being able to have him as part of the administration, I think, brings a lot to the table.
I think it was funny that he was talking about not wanting to see too many freshmen at quarterback, even though he did it.
Well, that's why he doesn't. Because what was it? He was a redshirt freshman at the time, technically.
Yeah, he got 5 years because in '82 it was still a club program, so he could come back for that extra year. And
Roger says he was here for 7-8 years or whatever.
Yeah, he had 8 years for 8 on his jersey. I never knew that story. I've seen it, knew he was retired, but I never knew why he got number 8.
Yeah,
that always fascinates me about jersey numbers.
I never knew that either. There was a couple of things that we talked to Tracy about that I never thought, and it's a lot of times we talk about it, some of the things that you find out are questions you never ask. And so it's always really interesting to me to talk to the people that have been here for as long as Tracy has. He was here at the beginning. He was there the first practice that Georgia Southern had.
And considering what Georgia Southern just lost at quarterback, a 4-year starter, a full 4-year starter in Shai Werts. Now, Eagle football's been around for 40 years. You could think about guys that have done that, started for 4 years. Kevin Ellison's in that category, but he was splitting time for much of the last 3 seasons with Fabian Upshaw, who's now back. You go to the mid-'90s, Kenny Robinson. But he got hurt in 2 of those 4 seasons. He started for 4 years, but he was hurt pretty significantly twice, including his senior season. You keep going back, and it's Raymond Gross before that, but even he didn't get to take over the full reins until the 7th game of '87. And even with Tracy, even though he got the 4 years of '83 through '86, when he was here in '82, he didn't get his first start until about midway through that campaign. So what Shai Werts just pulled off to start his first game against Auburn in '17, interrupted a couple of times because he was banged up, but for the most part, he was the guy for 4 straight seasons. Last guy to do that here was Tracy Ham.
That's crazy. And we're going to talk about a lot of different people throughout this quarterback session over the next few minutes, but you look at a guy like Cam Ransom, and I think Frank put it out on after the first day of practice, just a picture of him and what a physical specimen he is. But he's got an opportunity with Justin Tomlin not being available for the first 2 games. Coach Lunsford addressed that in the preseason media conference, that he will not be available for the first 2 games because of academics. And we're going to come back to that because there's 2 things that I want to make sure that are abundantly clear that have kind of been taken out of context a little bit. But Cam Ransom, if he starts against Gardner-Webb, and correct me if I'm wrong, he would be the first true freshman to start the opening game.
Yeah. There's been some redshirt freshmen.
Right, there's been some redshirt freshmen.
That redshirt year is a pretty important year,
no
especially
doubt.
when you're talking about quarterbacks.
No
but
doubt.
to be a true freshman, it's going to be between him and Sam Kenderson.
Yeah.
Quincy Bonner is the other quarterback that's here actively. But the odds are that a freshman is going to take the first snap against Gardner-Webb. If it's a true freshman, it's never happened here.
That's incredible.
He looks like he's a senior. Just to look at him physically, 6'3", 215, 220, depending on who's the one tipping the scale.
We had seen him from up here, just overlooking and seeing some of the preseason workouts, and you can tell who's a big dude, who's a big guy. Until I was standing right beside the creek when they ran across the bridge for the first time on, Friday?
Yeah.
I was like, good night. He is a large human.
Somebody that physically was there about midway through high school, someone that the first couple of days watching him, now granted, they don't go full pads until Thursday.
Right.
They're going to get tomorrow off because, oh, by the way, school starts. They haven't been full go yet, so you've got to temper what you've seen so far. But he's left-handed. Don't have a whole lot of those in the history of Georgia Southern football. Sam
We got
Kenderson,
2.
Yeah, first time we've ever had 2 lefties on the roster at the same time. And Sam Kenderson's going to be involved, and who's to say he won't be the starter? There's been a lot said about Ransom the first couple of days before full pads have even started. But the way he does things, it's just not something you see a whole lot here. And you could look back to Shy, but remember, he had the redshirt year in 2016. He had a chance to watch Kevin Ellison and Fabian Upshaw for that first season. And then I'm sure those eyes were pretty wide as a redshirt freshman when you're making your college debut in front of 85,000 people at Auburn. That's going to be a little bit different from whoever the starter is against Gardner-Webb, where there's hopefully between 20 and 25,000 people here on September the 4th. I'm curious to see how the first day in full pads go on Thursday. But especially that first scrimmage, which is 9:30 a.m. on Saturday as part of FanFest, that's going to be that initial way of what do you really have?
Yeah.
And that's not just at quarterback. I know that's our position today, but what does this team really have? Because right now we're watching a lot of routes on air, a little bit of contact, but erring on the side of caution, a little bit of COVID you're still concerned about. Now, guys that aren't vaccinated still have to get tested, so there's still protocols that are in place, even though there are a number of guys that are vaccinated, and coaches talked a little bit about that before. You're always going to lose some guys during camp. It just, that's how it goes. It happens. But if you can limit the amount of opportunities you have for those instances until you have to go full pads, then the chips fall where they do.
I'm just going to go down the roster of all of the guys that are listed at quarterback for this Georgia Southern team and just kind of give you a brief overview of what that quarterback room kind of looks like. You've got Connor Sigelski at quarterback, the redshirt freshman out of Atlanta. Coach Lunsford talked about it in the preseason media conference that he is probably not going to be available because of an injury until probably October-ish, mid to late October. You've got Sam Kenderson. We saw a couple of times last year, whether it be taking snaps, moving to that slot. It'll be kind of up in the air of where he will be, but he is somebody that we talked about it last year a lot. He is somebody that is so athletic that you have to get him the ball in some way, shape, or form, but he is in that contention to start at quarterback for Georgia Southern. Quincy Bonner, you mentioned, the freshman out of Lithonia, Georgia. Justin Tomlin, we know what he is. We know what he's got. You know what you're going to get with Tomlin, and Tracy just talked about it. The experience that he has is what Georgia Southern doesn't have in the rest of that quarterback room. But again, he will be out 2 games because of academics. You've got Will Lovett, the quarterback, redshirt senior, transferred in from Troy. He is mainly the scout team guy. And then Cam Ransom, the freshman that we talked about out of Lakeland, Florida. But I mentioned at the top of this segment, there's 2 things that I want to get out there and make sure that what actually has happened and the reasons are what is out.
Yeah.
The first one being Justin Tomlin, and there's a lot of speculation of what has gone on. the way that Coach Lunsford addressed it, and I think he did a really good job at his media conference this past fall, it was not the semester that Justin Tomlin was looking for academically. But Justin Tomlin has worked his butt off in the spring and in the summer to get it back, and the reason that it hasn't come out until now, because it could have been a lot worse. He could have been out for the season. He could have been suspended indefinitely, but he did the work he had to do to get back on the field for this team, and it is only a 2-game suspension.
And the availability that he was part of just a couple of days ago here at Paulson Stadium, all the media talked with all of the quarterbacks. He was very upfront about that. I think Nathan Dominitz of the Savannah Morning News asked about what limited him academically. He said he had dropped below the 2.0 that was necessary to stay eligible. And it was probably known that he was going to be unavailable for at least part of the upcoming season. He was going to go into the year probably as the guy that was the starter, but also knowing that he was going to miss time. We could just as easily, like you said, be here talking about the fact that he's not going to play at all this year.
Right.
The fact that it's only 2 games gives opportunities for other guys to get reps, but just because he's not going to play the first 2 games doesn't mean he's been sitting on the side. He's still taking his snaps because he has to be ready in the case of Game 3 when he's eligible to come back when Georgia Southern goes to Fayetteville to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. It could be his position. It may not be his position. There's no way to know that yet, but he's got to stay ready.
The other one that I wanted to kind of touch on and make sure that, again, what is correct, what is known is out there, is James Graham. A lot of people have brought up the conversation of why James Graham is not in the contention. He was moved to wide receiver back a couple of months ago, and yes, he was a quarterback at Georgia Tech. Coming from the ACC down to Georgia Southern, you would think that he would be in contention for the quarterback battle. But Coach Lunsford, again, talked about it in the preseason media conference that he had some issues in the spring. He wasn't able to take full reps at quarterback in the spring, so he's coming in almost as a true freshman to this offense, and you can say, well, he's coming from Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's not an option team anymore. Ever since Coach Collins took over, abracadabra, here's tight ends, and that's not an option team.
Here's bench pressing during pregame.
Right.
Yeah, we saw that at Clemson.
Yeah, there's a lot of cups and a lot of, all kinds of stuff up there, 404. But that's not a...
Above the line.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
But that is not a Paul Johnson team that you're coming from option principles. And so it's a completely different offense that you had to learn at Georgia Tech than if you're here at Georgia Southern. And yes, Georgia Southern trying to throw a little bit more under Doug Roos. We've heard it ever since Doug got to Statesboro again. But it's a completely different offense. You're coming in as a true freshman. Yes, he has the athleticism, and I think that's why you see that move to wide receiver.
And Doug brought it up during his pre-spring press conference that formation-wise might be a little bit different than what you saw in 14 and 15. Now, concept-wise, philosophy-wise, it's not going to look that different, but personnel-wise, a lot more 3-receiver looks, whereas before it was as heavy in the backfield as you could get with 3 backs, 2 tight ends, lots of combinations where that's just how it worked for those couple of campaigns. Granted, having Matt Breida made it a lot easier because he was probably the fastest guy on the field most of the time, regardless of who Georgia Southern was playing. But if the Eagles are going to go more 3 wide this year, that's a position that lost 4 of its top 7 pass catchers. We'll get to receivers a little bit deeper on in our previews in the couple of weeks we have before the season. But 4 of the top 7 pass catchers from last year are gone.
Yeah.
Graham is an athlete, capable of playing quarterback, but at this point, the best way to get him involved is to just get him on the field, and that may be something we revisit with Sam Kenderson. I still think Kenderson is going to have his chance at quarterback. He still could be the starter. Cam Ransom could be the starter against Gardner-Webb. Quincy Bonner could be the starter against Gardner-Webb. Amari Jones could be the starter at quarterback when we play Gardner-Webb on September the 4th. That is a distinct possibility.
And that's something that we were going to touch on in just a second, but just because James Graham on this roster card is listed as a wide receiver, Coach Lunsford talked about in the preseason media, that's not to say at some point he won't take snaps. Yeah. So it's not to say that, oh, he's a wide receiver now, he will never take another snap, he won't do it. No, sir, you're not taking a snap. That's not. It's whatever is best for the team at that time. Whether it's James Graham moves back to quarterback, is it a possibility? Sure.
Could be.
And you talk about Amari Jones, the transfer in from Tulane. He's listed as a running back. When you see him out here at practice, he's wearing a white jersey instead of the gold quarterback jersey. But he's taken a good number of reps at quarterback. And so being able to have that flexibility, have that versatility, I think it's something that is really impressive for Georgia Southern and something that you haven't necessarily had of a lot of different looks for Georgia Southern. And yes, you could say when you had Kennedy running the Wild Eagle, you had it a little bit, but when Kennedy came in, you pretty well knew that it was going to be a run. Amari Jones can sling it.
Played quarterback in high school in Frisco, Texas. He was a really good one his first couple of years before he had that gruesome foot and ankle injury during his junior season. In fact, today at practice, he threw a gorgeous deep ball to J.J. McAfee, the Georgia military transfer, over-the-shoulder catch, about a 50-yard touchdown during team period. So if you happen to see him at any point this season taking a snap, it isn't as if he's just looking to curl inside of a tackle or run a sweep somewhere to pick up a first down. He is capable of throwing the football. So when he's in, I don't want to restrict him as just being a running back, a wideout, a quarterback, a return man. He's a true athlete in the number of ways that you can use him. And Caleb Hood could be in that category as well. He's taken Wild Eagle snaps. He took a couple last year. If this offense, you need options. You got to have options, and Georgia Southern does.
And I think that's one of the biggest things that you see. Yes, it's a really spirited competition at quarterback for Georgia Southern, especially with Justin Tomlin, again, not being available the first two games, of who is going to take that opening snap. But that's not to say who takes the opening snap is not going to be taking the last snap of the game and isn't going to be taking snaps 3 weeks later.
It rarely is.
And so, especially in this kind of offense, you've got to have different options like you talked about. And I think there have been times where maybe the number 2 guy was just as good as the number 1 guy. You think about when Kevin Ellison and Jarek McKinnon were splitting time towards the tail end of that season. You talk about Fabian Upshaw, Kevin Ellison. But I don't know that I've had a season, especially since I've been here, where the 3, the 4, the 5 options could be starting at other Sun Belt Conference schools.
The way that Scott Sloan terms it is, how do you arrange the deck chairs? You've got 5 pretty good deck chairs if you're talking Georgia Southern quarterback. No, look, I'm not going to say that you could give it to any of them and it's going to be a 13-0, 14-0 season, depending on how many games Georgia Southern gets in, because you could still lose games with COVID this year. I sincerely hope that does not happen, but it is still a possibility regarding vaccinations and protocols and all that, and a number of other different factors. But despite there not being a ton of game experience, because we've brought this up with Tomlin before, he's been here since 2018, so this is going to be his 4th year in the program. He's still only started 4 games. And realistically, he has only played 3 full games. 2 of those were in 2019. He played 8 games last year. He had 1 full game. That was FAU, where he took every snap. Outside of that, spot duty here, spot duty there. Shai lost a helmet. Get him in there for passing and on 4th downs or late in the 4th quarter when Shai's shoulder was flaring up. So it's not as if he has all of this stocked experience that he can go on. Very capable. From what we've seen so far from Cam Ransom. Now, we need to see full pads to get a better idea when the lights go on and when it gets real. More than capable, though, from what we've seen so far. Yeah. He's got great tape, by the way, from high school. If you want to get fired up about Georgia Southern quarterbacks, go watch Cam Ransom's tape. Sam Kenderson's got game-breaking ability. Quincy Bonner has experience in this offense, having transferred from Army West Point Prep. The quarterback situation is in better hands considering the depth that exists. You just need to see how it translates at least those first 2 games while Tomlin has to sit, and then wherever it goes from there is where it goes from there.
Whenever somebody asks me about quarterback depth, the thing I keep going back to is 2014. I think it was 2014.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Isaiah Ute. I will never forget that man's name as long as I live.
And everybody that was in this stadium that November evening against ULM, we're not going to forget him either.
He scores a touchdown, and I got to stay in the camera, down in that corner near side. That was one of the best moments that I have experienced here at Georgia Southern because this place went bonkers.
When you combine that with what Matt Dobson did in that corner on the second to last play of the game, keeping ULM from scoring what would have been the game-tying touchdown with a PAT to possibly win it. Next pass is incomplete. Field gets rushed. 8-0 Sun Belt record in year one Sun Belt Conference Championship.
And the thing that makes that all that more special is Isaiah Ute was the third-string quarterback at that point.
His story, and
that's one that you can make a 30 about.
The Eagle diehards know that. He was the number one for a couple of games back in 2012, got hurt, kind of disappeared, and then you wondered, okay, where's Izzy? Well, Ellison goes down. Fabian goes down. He still could run, and he caped it up that sideline.
Oh, yes, he did.
And everybody went nuts.
Look, Glenn brings up a good point. And then Dr. Brooks Keel yells, Eagle Nation.
I wish I could have been here that night to see it.
That was awesome.
But I've watched that game a couple of times, and I've watched that play a couple of times. I've heard Chris's call a couple of times, and it was not necessarily the surprise because he was capable of always doing that, but to do it in that moment despite barely having a snap for 3 years and then being able to come through in that situation, one of the top moments since Georgia Southern moved up.
That was a really fun day. A really fun day. But that is our synopsis of what Georgia Southern quarterbacks look like in the span of, 15 minutes or so. But we will be going through position by position. We'll have to combine a few positions. We'll probably do running backs and wide receivers all in the same day, do the lines in the same day. But as we're getting closer and closer to kickoff, just 23, 24?
25.
25.
And the funny
Math
thing
is not my thing.
Well, Captain Clack's highlight today, we're on day 25. It's Tracy's 25-yard touchdown run against Arkansas State in the 86 championship game.
Mail him the trophy.
Well, that's what they thought. That's what they thought.
That'll wrap up this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Again, as we get closer to the season, we'll be moving locations. We'll be moving to Monday nights starting at 6 o'clock from 6 to 6:45, 7-ish.
That'll be sometime within the next
couple of weeks, but we will let you know when that happens. But we will be back next Tuesday right here at Allen E. Paulson Stadium. If you have any suggestions for us of who you would like to see on the podcast, let us know. If you have any ideas of what you would like to see, let us know as well. But that'll wrap up this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. We will talk to you next Tuesday right here on Facebook Live, and however you get your podcast, make sure to subscribe not only to the podcast service, but also go and check out these interviews on YouTube. Those are going up on the Georgia Southern Sports Network new YouTube page. I guess it's not new anymore. It's a couple weeks old. It's still got that new YouTube smell.
Relatively new.
Yeah, there you go.
Only a couple mouse clicks. We're good.
There you go. But make sure to go subscribe to Georgia Southern Sports Network on YouTube as well. For the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.